She was an ordinary woman to everyone who knew her, quiet, composed, and disciplined in her faith. She attended Mass, prayed the Rosary, and lived a life that many would consider respectable. But beneath the surface of her calm exterior, she carried a wound that had never healed. It began decades earlier, with a betrayal she had never expected from someone she loved deeply. The pain from that moment settled into her heart like a stone, and instead of allowing forgiveness to soften it, she wrapped herself around it, guarding her hurt as if releasing it would somehow diminish the gravity of what had been done to her. Over the years, this unresolved pain grew into something far darker. Every time she remembered the offense, the bitterness resurfaced with a sharper edge. She convinced herself that forgiveness was impossible, that the person who wronged her didn't deserve mercy. It became her silent companion, shaping how she saw herself, others, and even God. While her lips prayed, her heart remained hardened. She thought she had moved on, but unforgiveness had quietly taken root, spreading through her soul like an unseen poison. When she eventually stood before Padre Pio, she appeared no different from the countless people who came seeking spiritual guidance. But Padre Pio, gifted with the ability to see beyond the physical world, felt a heaviness the moment she entered his presence. There was a spiritual weight around her, something thick and suffocating, almost like a shadow that clung to her every step. He understood immediately. This was not simply a woman carrying a memory. This was a soul carrying a lifelong prison. The bitterness she refused to let go of had become part of her identity, shaping her destiny in ways she never realized. The confessional was a place where thousands came seeking peace, but for Padre Pio, it was often a battlefield of invisible realities. When the woman knelt before him, she spoke softly, offering a list of sins that seemed ordinary, almost routine. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were controlled, calculated, carefully chosen to reveal only what she was comfortable sharing. Padre Pio listened patiently, but his attention was not on her voice. Instead, he was drawn towards something far deeper. In that moment, a sudden spiritual clarity opened before him. It was as if a veil lifted, revealing a truth hidden beneath years of silence. Padre Pio saw not the woman's face, but her soul dimmed, constricted, wrapped tightly in coils of resentment. A cold heaviness radiated from her spirit. It was familiar, something he had seen before, but rarely in such intensity. The bitterness she carried had not just wounded her, it had reshaped her entire inner being. To Padre Pio, the confessional often became a window into the unseen. And now, as he gazed at her bowed head, he saw flashes of the moment she had been wronged. He saw the deep hurt, the betrayal, the tears she had never allowed anyone to witness. But he also saw the moment she chose to close her heart. She had built walls around her pain, refusing mercy, refusing healing, refusing even the possibility of forgiveness. Her confession continued, but Padre Pio could sense the truth she didn't speak, the resentment buried so deeply she almost convinced herself it wasn't there. Yet spiritually, it was louder than any words she could ever say. He realized that her greatest sin was not anger nor hurt, but the years she spent refusing to let grace touch her wound. What Padre Pio saw next was not something visible to the human eye. It was a spiritual reality, a truth stripped of all illusions. As the woman knelt before him, her physical form remained calm and composed, but her soul appeared completely different. In the silence of that confessional, he saw her spirit as if surrounded by heavy rusted chains. Each link represented a memory she refused to release, a wound she chose to revisit again and again. The chains were wrapped tightly around her, digging into her soul like iron bands that had been there for decades. Padre Pio understood immediately that these chains were not imposed on her by someone else. She had forged them herself, link by link, each time she replayed the betrayal, each time she nourished her bitterness instead of seeking healing. Unforgiveness had transformed into a spiritual prison one she had lived inside for so long that she no longer recognized it as a prison at all. The most striking part of Padre Pio's vision was the way her soul struggled. He saw faint movements, subtle attempts to rise toward light, but every effort was pulled back by the weight of resentment. The chains didn't just bind her, they anchored her, keeping her from growing, from receiving grace, from experiencing the freedom she prayed for but never fully surrendered to. Her soul was not evil. It was wounded, exhausted, longing for release. Padre Pio sensed the deep conflict within her. On one hand, she wanted peace. On the other, she clung tightly to her hurt as if it were the last piece of control she had over her past. The tragedy was clear. Her refusal to forgive had become a curse she carried into every part of her life, slowly consuming her from within. Padre Pio knew that unless she chose forgiveness, the chains would remain, shaping not only her life on earth but her eternity beyond it. Padre Pio knew he could not ignore what he had seen. The woman before him believed she had come for a simple confession, a routine moment of spiritual cleansing. But to Padre Pio, it was far more urgent. This was a soul standing at a crossroads, a heart carrying a wound so old and so deep that it had begun to shape her eternal direction. He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle yet firm, carrying the weight of divine truth. He did not speak to her as a judge, but as a shepherd seeing a lost sheep trapped in its own thorns. He told her that God had seen her suffering, every tear, every betrayal, every moment she thought she stood alone. He acknowledged her pain with compassion, letting her know that heaven did not dismiss her story. But then he spoke of something harder, the danger of a heart that refuses to forgive. Padre Pio explained that forgiveness was not about pretending the wound never happened. It was not about excusing the actions of others. It was about freeing the soul from the poison that resentment becomes over time. He warned her gently that holding on to bitterness slowly pushes God's grace away, creating a barrier the soul cannot climb unless it willingly lets go. At first, the woman listened in polite silence, but Padre Pio sensed her resistance. Her heart tightened at the mere mention of forgiveness. Years of pain had hardened her spirit, and she believed letting go would dishonor her suffering. Padre Pio looked at her with deep sorrow, realizing that her true battle was not with the person who hurt her, but with the chains she had allowed to grow inside. In that moment, he offered her a chance, one sincere act of surrender, one moment of courage, one step toward mercy that could break a lifetime of spiritual bondage. It was an invitation from heaven itself. Whether she accepted it or not would shape everything that followed. When Padre Pio looked into her soul, he did not see condemnation from God, he saw the consequence of her own choices. Unforgiveness had shaped her entire interior life, and now it threatened to shape her eternity. He understood a profound spiritual truth. A heart that refuses to forgive cannot fully receive forgiveness. Not because God withholds mercy, but because the soul has closed itself to it. Padre Pio sensed that if she continued on this path, the bitterness she carried would follow her beyond death. Heaven is a place of perfect love, and those who cling to resentment create a distance between themselves and divine light. A soul tangled in hatred cannot rise freely. It is pulled downward by the very chains it refuses to break. He tried once more to reach her, reminding her that forgiveness is liberation, not weakness. It is the healing only God can complete if the soul opens even a small door. But he also knew that God never forces the heart. The woman had to choose mercy for herself. In the spiritual realm, Padre Pio saw what awaited her if she refused. A journey weighed down by shadows, a soul struggling to move toward light but constantly dragged back by old wounds. Not a punishment, but the natural consequence of a heart that never let go. Her story stands as a warning and a hope. Forgiveness is not for the one who hurt us. It is the key that frees our own soul in this life and in the life to come.